Welcome to our deep dive into the fascinating psychology of money. We've got excerpts from Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money you handed us, and we're ready to explore how we humans act with our finances. It's not always about smarts, but about understanding our quirks and really preparing for the long game.
You got it. You'll learn how your own history shapes your money decisions, how luck and risk are way bigger than we think, and why knowing when you have enough can save you from some big traps.
Yeah, Housel doesn't mess around. He starts with a story of an exec throwing 5 grand at a $500 problem just to prove a point. Emotions taking over logic, huh?
It's like he's showing how we can sabotage our best intentions with our own behavior. This goes right into his idea that money is less about hard rules and more about psychology. Like, think about healthcare. We've come so far with science, but with money, our brains are still making it messy, unpredictable.
So if we're listening, how do we actually use this? If we know our minds aren't always logical, what can we do to make better choices?
Being aware is huge. That's the first step. Realizing our past experiences shape how we see money. It's like looking through a lens colored by our own history. Like someone who lived through crazy inflation, their idea of risk and reward is totally different from someone who haven't.
You know, it reminds me of those economists who found people's investments were tied to the economy they grew up in. People from the 70s, with all that inflation, were much more careful compared to those who didn't live through it. Makes you wonder how much of what we do now is just those old habits.
And that's why you get smart people disagreeing so much about money. It's not always right versus wrong, it's the personal stories we've built up. That's why Housel says, question what you believe, what biases you have.
All right, so we know those biases are there. But how do we break free to make better choices? Feels like we're fighting our own minds.
Well, imagine a pro athlete without a coach. They need someone to spot weaknesses, right? Same with money. An advisor, a mentor, someone outside can help see past those tricky emotions.
Right, we get help for other stuff, so why not money? We don't got to go it alone. And speaking of needing help, luck, right? Bill Gates, huge success. But Housel says he was lucky too. Skills, timing, it all lined up perfectly.
The problem is how we see luck. Others screw up, it's bad choices. We screw up, bad luck. It's easier to think success is pure skill, no chance involved. But honestly, luck and risk, they're always there.
Like that hedge fund, long-term capital management. Brains, money, tons of it. But chasing more, took on too much risk, boom, lost it all. Proves brains don't always beat chance.
Shows you getting money is one thing, keeping it, that's a whole other skill. Easy to get caught up in bigger numbers, but the real winners are the ones who survive when things go south.
Reminds me of a story about John Bogle, the Vanguard guy, and Joseph Heller, the author. Some billionaire bragging about making tons of money every day, and Heller just says, yeah, but I have something he'll never have. Enough. Seems like knowing when you're good is crucial, but how do you do that when enough keeps changing?
It's that comparison trap, isn't it? Always someone richer, flashier car, bigger place. It never ends if you let outside stuff define you. That's why it's so important to decide what enough is on your own terms, based on what matters to you, not everyone else.
Makes you think about social media and all that, how it pushes us to want more, even when we have plenty. I bet a lot of us listening know that feeling, always wanting more.
And that's where intention comes in. Are you spending to impress people you don't even know? Or are you investing in stuff that really makes you happy? When your money choices match your values, that's how you escape that always wanting more cycle.
It's like taking back control. Money's a tool, you use it to build the life you want, not let it run the show. Now, switching gears a bit, Housel talks about compounding, that snowball effect. He uses Warren Buffett, right? His wealth, it's not just that he's great at investing, it's that he's been doing it for decades.
Time. That's the magic ingredient. Even small investments, consistent ones, give them enough time, they can get huge. It's a reminder that patience, being disciplined, it's as valuable as picking the right stock.
And you know what's interesting? The comparison to Jim Simon's Renaissance technologies, right? Dude gets higher returns than Buffett, consistently. But he started later, so his total wealth is way less. Shows you, starting early, even with a little, that's huge.
Absolutely. Think of time as a multiplier. The earlier you start, the more your money can grow exponentially, no matter your age or income. This is something everyone needs to think about.
Okay, so we've talked about how our brains work with money, how luck and risk are always in the mix, and why enough is so important to figure out. What about freedom, though? Housel keeps coming back to that.
Because it's at the heart of it all. Money's real power is buying control over your time. It's not just having more free time, but choosing how you spend your days, doing work that means something, being able to adapt when life throws you a curveball.
Yeah, I get that. I was stuck in a job, paid well, but no freedom. Stress, overwork, felt like I was living someone else's life. Finally, I quit, saved enough, and went for music. Big pay cut, sure, but that feeling of being independent, no price on that.
You traded security for control, and that's a trade a lot of people would make. Shows you money success isn't always about the biggest paycheck. It's finding that balance, living a life that matches what you believe in.
It's having enough to feel safe, but also the freedom to chase what matters. And sometimes that means risks, choices that don't look good on paper, but make you feel alive.
Exactly. Money's a tool, and there's lots of ways to use it.
Hmm.
The key is you use it on purpose to build a life that's good financially and personally fulfilling.
And let's not forget, wealth, you can't always see it. Housel talks about his valet days, saw people in fancy cars, but they were stretching to keep up appearances. Shows you what's on the surface doesn't tell the whole story.
It's a reminder to stay humble, not get caught in that keeping up with the Joneses trap. We don't think much about saving because it's about what you don't spend, but real wealth is that cushion, that safety net, so you can make choices without constantly stressing about money.
And that cushion, like Housel says, it comes from the space between your ego and your income. More you save, faster it grows, more freedom and security you have down the line. Like building a fortress ready for whatever life throws at you.
It's like that oil crisis back in the 70s. We didn't run out because we got better at using what we had. Same with money. It's about making the most of it, not just trying to earn more and more.
So before we go further, I'm curious, for those listening, what's sticking with you? What made you go, aha? Maybe rethink your own relationship with money. Take a second, think about what we've said, how it might apply to your own journey.
What hit me is success with money, it's not a straight line. It's those mental traps, understanding luck and risk, and deciding what enough means for you. It's figuring yourself out as much as it's about managing money.
That's a great point, and it leads right into what's next. Reason and emotion, how they mix in our money choices. Stick with us as we keep diving deep into the psychology of money.
You know, it's funny. We try to be so logical with money, like there's some perfect formula. But Housel, he says sometimes reasonable beats rational, and I kind of like that.
I'm curious what's reasonable here. It sounds like he's saying it's okay to not be perfect with our money plans.
Right. He uses Harry Markowitz, the guy who won a Nobel Prize for figuring out the best way to invest. But for his own retirement, he just did a simple 50-50 split, stocks and bonds. Why? To avoid regrets later.
So the expert on investing keeps it simple for himself. That goes against everything we hear, like we got to overthink everything to win with money.
It just shows real life is messy. There's fear. There's that keeping up with the Joneses pressure. Sometimes peace of mind is better than the perfect plan, even if it's not the most rational thing.
It's like I could have a super healthy meal, perfectly balanced, but I'm craving comfort food. Sometimes you just want what feels good, even if it's not the bad choice.
Exactly. And Housel, he points out other times this works, like that home bias where people invest in companies from their own country, even if it's limiting. Not totally rational, but that familiarity, feeling connected, it can make you feel better than just going by the numbers.
Yeah, it's like choosing to shop local, even if it's cheaper online. You feel good supporting something familiar.
Now, let's talk history. We use it to predict the future, right?
Yeah.
Especially with money. But Housel says, watch out for the historians as prophets trap. Just because something worked before doesn't mean it always will.
Wait, so past performance doesn't guarantee future results. They say that all the time with investments, but it's easy to forget when you see those big numbers.
You got it. The world's always changing. New stuff comes along and disrupts everything. Like the dot-com bubble. No way anyone could have predicted that from history. That was totally new territory.
Makes me think of that book, The Intelligent Investor. Benjamin Graham, right. Even he said his formulas needed updates because the market keeps changing. He knew you got to adapt.
The lesson is, history is a good teacher, but not a fortune teller. Learn from the past, but expect surprises. The future, it's unpredictable, and being okay with that, that's how you make good money choices.
So if we shouldn't just rely on the past, how do we deal with the unknowns, the stuff we can't predict?
That's where room for error comes in. You build a buffer into your plans, expect things to go wrong, and have the flexibility to adjust.
Like an emergency fund, but for your whole financial strategy. Having that cushion for when things inevitably go sideways.
You got it. It's admitting you don't know everything, that unexpected stuff happens, and being ready to change course. It sounds weird, but having that room for error actually lets you take more risks, calculated ones, because you're less likely to be totally wrecked if things don't go perfectly.
Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Right? Making your finances strong so you can handle the tough times.
Now, let's get into something really interesting about us humans. Stories. We love them, even if they're not true. We're all storytellers in a way, aren't we?
For sure. We need explanations, we see patterns, and we turn it all into stories to make sense of things. It's how we learn and understand the world.
Housel uses the example of a baby, figuring out how things work.
Yeah.
Blanket means warmth. Snuggles means safety. It's like building these little stories from the very beginning. It's how we learn and adapt.
And as adults, those instincts, they stick with us, especially with money. We tell ourselves stories about how markets work, why companies will win, why one investment is better than another, but sometimes those stories lead us down the wrong path.
The tough part is, we get attached to our stories, even when there's proof we're wrong. We only see what confirms our beliefs and miss other viewpoints or facts. That's why you get bubbles, people hanging on to investments that are tanking.
Like they say, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled. Once we buy into a story, it's hard to let go, even if it's hurting us.
And this leads us to an interesting thing. Pessimism versus optimism. Have you noticed? Negativity gets more attention, like it's smarter somehow.
Definitely. It's like bad news has more gravity, you know? It seems more believable because it focuses on danger, threats, and that taps into our survival instincts.
Exactly. That's why the news is full of bad stuff. Why those end-of-the-world predictions go viral. We're wired to pay attention to the bad stuff, like a built-in alarm system.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Optimism, it might be quieter, less dramatic, but it usually wins in the end.
There's that quote, pessimism sounds smart, but optimism is a better bet. It takes faith to believe in a good outcome, especially when things are tough.
Housel uses Japan after World War II. Devastated, right? But they built themselves into a powerhouse. That shows you, even when things are bad, there's potential for growth.
It's believing in people, that we can overcome setbacks and make progress, not ignoring risks or pretending everything's perfect, but believing we can figure things out and build a better future.
Exactly. Optimism isn't about being naive. It's about focusing on what's possible, not just what's holding us back.
So how do we get more optimistic, especially with so much negativity around? It's easy to get sucked into the doom and gloom.
Start by noticing what stories you're feeding your mind. Choose to see different perspectives, stories of resilience, people doing great things, progress happening. Remember, progress is often slow, but it's always there.
It's about shifting your attention, looking for those good things, and remembering that even when things are tough, there's always a chance for something better.
Now, I want to ask you, the listener, something. Think about stories that pull towards negativity. What stories are you telling yourself about money? Maybe it's a belief that you're limited or a fear of investing. What might be stopping you from reaching your goals?
That's something to think about, challenging those limiting beliefs and changing the story. And that leads us perfectly to the last part of our deep dive. We'll pull out some key takeaways from the psychology of money and see how you can use them in your own life. So we've really gone deep with this psychology of money stuff. Our brains can trick us, luck and risk are always there, and wanting more, it never really ends, huh? What's the takeaway for everyone listening, like practically?
What I like about Housel, it's not all numbers and formulas, you know. It's about using that stuff to build a life that's good financially and just good, period.
Yeah, he's saying money is a tool, not the goal itself,
Yeah.
right? Making your money choices match your values, what you want in life, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And that freedom, feeling secure, that's huge. His story about quitting with like 12 grand to chase music, that was bold. But it shows what happens when you have enough to go after what you love.
That hit home for me and probably a lot of people listening. He wasn't after millions. He wanted something more valuable. Control over his time, to do what he dreamed of. But let's be real, not everyone can just up and quit like that. So how do we balance chasing dreams with being financially okay?
It goes back to what enough means, right? Not keeping up with the neighbors, not some crazy amount of wealth. Enough to feel secure, to make choices without that money stress eating at you.
That feeling of having a good base, you know, knowing you'll be all right when things get rough, but also enjoying now, not just waiting for some far-off future.
And that takes us to what Housel says about volatility, the ups and downs,
Right.
part of the game, right? If you want those long-term gains, you got to ride the waves. It's thinking long-term, not freaking out over every little change.
Like staying on track, trusting the process, not letting your emotions take over. Imagine being on a roller coaster. Yeah. There's going to be drops and turns, but you keep your hands up and enjoy the ride because you know it'll be awesome in the end.
And remember, nobody's perfect, Everyone makes mistakes, even pros. The important thing is you learn from it, change your strategy, and keep your eyes on the prize, the long-term goal.
That takes the pressure off. And it connects to that end of history illusion he talks about. We think what we want now is what we'll always want, but we change, right? What mattered at 20 might be totally different at 50. So how do we build in that flexibility, knowing things change?
It's realizing life throws curveballs and being ready to change plans. Your money plan shouldn't be set in stone. It should change as you do.
It's like packing for a trip, right? You take what you need, but leave room for souvenirs, stuff you find along the way. You don't overpack with things you might not even use.
Love that analogy. And while we're talking about making room, spending your money on things that matter to you, that's key. Don't get a fancy car just to impress people. Spend on things you enjoy, things that are important to you, not what everyone else thinks you should have.
It's being smart about where your money goes, making sure it matches what you care about, making choices for yourself, not because of some pressure or what society says.
At the end of the day, money is a tool. It can build things up or tear them down. It's our choice how we use it.
That's a powerful thought and a good place to wrap up our deep dive. But before we go, something to think about. What's one small thing you can do today to make your money habits match your long-term goals?
Maybe set up automatic savings. Finally talk to your partner about money. Or figure out what enough means to you.
Little steps like that can make a big difference over time. Remember, success with money, it's not about winning some game. It's about living a life you enjoy without all that money stress.
And that's what we should all be aiming for.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.